The first time Emily saw Ethan, she didn't notice his face. She noticed the sound. A tired engine coughing under the hotel's covered entrance, the kind of sound that didn't belong beneath chandeliers and valet stands and a red carpet that looked more expensive than some people's rent. People turned before the car even stopped, because in rooms like this, attention is a currency, and anything that interrupts the rhythm of luxury gets spent fast. Ethan's old car rolled forward like it was apologizing for being there. Emily's laugh came out sharp, automatic, too quick to be kind. Then she caught herself, because laughter at a company event could be a weapon if you aimed it right, or a mistake if you didn't. She set her champagne flute down on a tray and leaned toward the glass doors, squinting through the lobby lights. The driver stepped out slowly, shutting the door with that careful touch men use when they know the door won't forgive a slam. He wore a plain charcoal suit, no flash, no watch anyone could see, no bright tie meant to announce ambition. Just neat, clean, quiet. And for a half-second, Emily had the irrational thought that he looked like someone who didn't need to prove anything. Then she saw the scuffed bumper, the faded paint, the rear window sticker half peeled like a bad decision he couldn't quite let go of. The thought died. People don't arrive like that to the Westbridge Summit Gala unless they're lost or desperate or about to get embarrassed. And Emily loved seeing people get embarrassed. Because when a room watches someone fall, everyone else stands a little taller. She drew in 2 managers from marketing with a tilt of her chin, a practiced little motion that said, "Come here, this will be good." When they joined her, she pointed through the glass. "Tell me that's not an employee," she said. One of the managers, Brett, laughed loudly, had loud opinions, and snorted. "That has to be a vendor." Emily's smile widened. No, look at him. He's dressed like he's trying." She watched Ethan thank the valet, thank him, actually, and place the keys in his palm like the car mattered. Then he adjusted his jacket and walked toward the doors, calm as if the stairs were background noise. Emily turned to Brett and lowered her voice just enough to feel intimate. "I swear, if he walks in here like he belongs, I'm going to lose it." Brett chuckled. "Who even is he?" Emily didn't know, yet, and that bothered her more than she would admit. Inside, the ballroom glowed with gold light and glass and the soft, expensive hush of people who thought their salaries made them important. The Westbridge Summit Gala wasn't technically mandatory, but everyone understood it was. Promotions were announced at these events. Contracts got whispered into place. The CEO didn't mingle much, but his eyes moved across the room like a scanner, and if your face landed in his memory, your year got easier. Emily had planned this night like generals plan a battlefield. She was 32, director of brand strategy and title, and in her head, she was already a VP. She wore a black dress cut sharp at the shoulders, minimal jewelry, hair pinned back, a look that said, competent, expensive, untouchable. She'd brought the right people into her orbit early. Executive assistants, senior analysts, anyone who could move information. She had also learned the oldest rule in corporate life. If you control the story, you control the room. Tonight, she would control the story. And Ethan, walking in with that old car, had just handed her something easy. He came through the doors without hesitation, and for a moment the cold from outside clung to his shoulders like a visible outline. He scanned the room once, not nervously, not eagerly, just taking it in, like a man reading a report.
Then he stepped aside near one of the tall columns, out of the traffic, as if he was content to be invisible. Emily watched him from across the lobby, thinking, "Poor-looking single dad." The phrase came to her because she'd seen his photo on the internal newsletter once, some work-life balance spotlight piece that HR pushed out to pretend the company cared. A picture of him with a little girl on his shoulders at a park. "Single dad," the caption had said, like it was a personality trait. Emily had rolled her eyes then. She rolled them now.
That should have been nothing, a simple line, but it irritated her because it implied the room didn't matter, and Emily had spent her entire career believing rooms like this were the only thing that mattered. She smiled anyway, sharper now. True, it's just a room, but first impressions do matter. Her gaze flicked casually toward the entrance, especially when you arrive the way you did. Ethan followed her glance without urgency. "My car?" Emily gave a small laugh, like she was being playful, like she wasn't about to cut him open in front of whoever was listening. "Your car," she confirmed. "Look, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to help you. People here are, well, they're judged by appearance. That's how it works." Behind her, Brett had drifted closer, drawn in by the scent of drama. Two women from finance lingered at a polite distance, pretending they weren't listening. Emily continued, voice just loud enough. "You know how it looks when someone comes to a gala like this in an old car. It's like you're telling everyone you didn't plan for your own life." Ethan's eyes met hers again. "Or maybe it looks like I like what I like." Emily blinked, then laughed. "That's adorable." She leaned in, and the next part was for the audience. "Listen, Ethan, next year, do yourself a favor. Borrow something, rent something, a luxury car, an expensive car, anything that doesn't sound like it might die under the valet stand. You don't want to be the guy everyone remembers for the wrong reason." Brett laughed on cue. One of the finance women covered her mouth, half amused, half uncomfortable. Ethan stood still. No flush of anger, no scramble to defend himself. His calm didn't read as confidence to them, it read as surrender. Emily felt the room tilt toward her, the way it always did when she performed. She mocked him, and the laughter rewarded her. She underestimated him, and the ease of it made her bolder. "Honestly," she added with a sweet shrug, "judging someone by their car isn't fair, but it happens, and if you're going to play in this league, you should at least show up like you belong." Ethan's gaze drifted past her shoulder, toward the ballroom, toward the crowd that had decided he was safe to laugh at. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet enough that Emily had to lean in to catch it. "You think you know my financial status because of what I drove tonight?" Emily's smile stayed fixed. "I think I know what people assume," she said, "and assumptions become reality in places like this." Ethan nodded once, as if she'd confirmed a number he already had. Then he said, "Okay," just one word. And for reasons Emily couldn't explain, it made her feel like she'd just signed something without reading it. Across the room, the MC tapped a microphone and asked everyone to gather for the CEO's remarks. The crowd began to move, slow and eager, like a tide toward power. Emily turned away from Ethan with a satisfied breath. She had done what she came to do: establish herself as the one who saw the room clearly, and establish him as the one who didn't. Public humiliation didn't always need shouting. Sometimes it only needed a smile and an audience.
As Emily walked toward the center, she glanced back once. Ethan hadn't moved. He was still by the column, hands relaxed at his sides, watching the room like he was measuring it. Not enduring it, measuring it.
And somewhere deep under Emily's certainty, an uncomfortable question tried to rise. If he was really as small as she thought, why did he look so unbothered? Emily had always believed humiliation was a kind of proof. If a person could embarrass him in public and they didn't fight back, then the room assumed they had nothing worth defending. It was simple math, the kind corporate life trained you to do without thinking. Power speaks, weakness absorbs. The ones who absorbed became the background. The ones who spoke became leaders. So when Ethan stayed by the column and let her words land without flinching, Emily felt validated. The crowd drifting toward the stage carried her confidence with it, like a coat she'd thrown over her shoulders. But the night didn't settle the way she expected. It sharpened. The CEO's remarks were polite, corporate, forgettable. Buzzwords about resilience, innovation, streamlined priorities. Applause rose and fell on schedule. People sipped champagne like it was part of their job description. Emily clapped with everyone else, eyes moving constantly. She watched who leaned toward whom. She noted who got waved closer by senior leadership. She kept her face open, her smile ready, her posture saying, "I'm already where you need me to be." In her head, she was building the next quarter's map. And then, like a splinter under skin, Ethan's okay stayed with her. It wasn't defiant, it wasn't wounded. It sounded final, like an answer given to himself, not to her. Emily pushed the thought away and rejoined her orbit. She told a funny story about a disastrous product launch and made a VP laugh. She complimented a board advisor's tie. She did all the things ambitious people do to make themselves memorable. Still, every few minutes, her eyes cut back toward the eastern column. Ethan didn't work the room. He didn't hover near the executives. He didn't stand with the other operations people like a man trying to prove he belonged. He stayed where he was, occasionally nodding to someone who passed, occasionally speaking to a waiter as if the waiter was a person. That, more than anything, annoyed her. Because if he was truly a poor-looking single dad with nothing but bills and responsibility, he should have been desperate for attention tonight. He should have been grateful for proximity. He should have been nervous. Instead, he looked like a man waiting for something that would arrive whether he chased it or not. Emily decided she didn't like mysteries. She moved through the crowd until she found Marissa from HR near the dessert table, a woman who knew everyone's salary range and liked pretending she didn't. "Marissa," Emily said, lightly, "quick question. Ethan from operations, what's his story?" Marissa blinked. "Ethan?" "The single father," Emily clarified. "Quiet guy, old car outside." Marissa's mouth tightened in a way that suggested she didn't approve of Emily's interest, but she answered anyway. "Operations analyst. Been here a few years. Keeps to himself. Good performance reviews. No drama." Emily smiled. "No drama," she repeated, like it was suspicious. "Does he have family money or something?" Marissa gave her a look. "Why?" Emily lifted her shoulder. "Curiosity. People don't act that calm unless they've got something." Marissa hesitated. "Not that I've heard. He's ordinary, a humble father. You know how HR pieces it together. Daycare issues, schedule juggling, that sort of thing." Emily nodded, satisfied. Ordinary. That fit her story. That made her earlier joke feel justified.
She'd simply pointed out the truth everyone else was thinking. She left Marissa and returned to her circle, just as Brett was telling someone, loud enough to be heard, that Ethan's car belonged in a museum. Emily laughed again, a little too brightly, and then she added her own spin because she couldn't resist polishing the cruelty into wit. "Come on," she said, raising her glass. "It's not even about money. It's about effort. You can tell when someone has ambition, when someone is moving up, and when someone is just staying put." The laughter that followed was bigger than before. It wasn't just Brett. It was two analysts, a senior manager, a woman from finance. It became a small wave that traveled outward and returned to Emily as approval. She felt the room agree with her. Ethan was standing only 20 feet away, close enough that he heard every word. He didn't look over. He didn't react. Emily watched him absorb it, and something cold in her chest warmed into pleasure. She mocked him again, and the world stayed on her side. Then the night offered her a gift, a moment to turn cruelty into spectacle.
A junior coordinator, a kid named Jason, newly hired, still wearing his suit like it was borrowed, stepped backward into a server. A tray tilted, a glass of red wine arced down and splashed across the pale carpet and over the edge of Emily's dress. The room inhaled as one. Red on white looked like a crime scene. Emily froze for a single stunned second, then anger snapped into place so smoothly it was like she'd practiced it. "Are you serious?" she said, loud, sharp. "Do you have any idea what this dress costs?" Jason's face went pale. I'm so sorry. It was an accident." Emily stepped forward, forcing him to step back. An accident is what people call incompetence when they don't want to admit it. You don't just ruin someone's night and shrug. A few people murmured sympathetic noises. None of them stopped her. No one wanted to get between Emily and her rage, because rage could splash. Jason looked around helplessly, searching for someone older, someone with authority, someone to tell Emily she'd gone too far. No one moved. That was the real rule in rooms like this. Everyone wants to be kind, but nobody wants to be next. Emily leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it more vicious. "This is why some people stay junior forever," she said, "because they can't handle a simple room without making a mess." Jason swallowed. His eyes were glossy. He nodded, the way people nod when they're trying not to cry. Emily felt a rush of power, the ugly kind. She was proving a point. Standards mattered. Some people belong in rooms like this, and some should use the service elevator. And then Ethan appeared. He didn't charge in. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped into the space beside Jason like he'd been there all along. His hand touched Jason's shoulder, brief and steady, and Jason's breath hitched as if that small contact had reminded him he was human. Ethan looked at Emily. "It was an accident," he said, calm. Emily's anger pivoted toward him instantly, like a searchlight finding a new target. "Of course you'd say that. You always do. Softness, excuses, that's why you're still where you are." Ethan's expression stayed neutral, but his eyes sharpened in a way Emily didn't like. "You don't know where I am," he said. Emily laughed, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "I know exactly where you are. You're the guy who shows up in an old car and thinks nobody notices. You're the guy who wants to be treated like a rich man without doing what rich men do." She gestured toward the room. "This is business. This is performance. This is visibility.
And you don't get visibility by hiding. The server knelt, blotting wine with frantic napkins. Jason stood stiffly, humiliated, trapped between apology and shame. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't even keep looking at Emily. He looked past her shoulder, toward the corridor near the coat check, where the chief operating officer had been standing with two directors, watching everything like it was entertainment. Emily followed Ethan's gaze and saw it too, the COO's eyes, interested and unreadable. Emily's confidence surged. Good. Let them watch. Let them see she held standards. Let them see she could dominate a situation. She turned back to Ethan, voice sweetening into a knife. "Stop playing hero," she said. "It doesn't suit you." Ethan nodded once. "Okay," he said, again, the same final word, the same unsettling calm. Then he guided Jason gently away from the stain and toward the bar, as if Emily's fury was just weather passing over them. The crowd's ring dissolved, not because anyone felt guilty, but because the entertainment had ended. Emily stared after Ethan, annoyed by the way he'd taken control without raising his voice. She told herself it didn't matter. In a corporate world, calm doesn't win promotions. Assertiveness did. Visibility did. The right car did. People were judged by appearance, and she knew how to weaponize that. And yet, as she smoothed the wine-splashed fabric of her dress and forced herself to laugh at Brett's next joke, the memory of Ethan's gaze toward the COO stuck in her mind.
Not pleading, not fearful, more like checking a detail, as if he were collecting evidence. And for the first time that night, Emily wondered, briefly, reluctantly, whether she'd just performed for the wrong audience. By 10 o'clock, the gala had split into its usual layers. Near the stage, executives formed tight circles, talking in low voices that sounded like decisions being made. Along the edges, managers hovered and laughed too loudly, hoping proximity would turn into opportunity. In the middle, the newest employees drifted like satellites, unsure where they were allowed to land. Emily moved between all of it like she owned the map. She'd recovered from the wine incident with the speed of someone trained to treat embarrassment as a temporary inconvenience. A different dress would have been better, but she couldn't change the night, only control how people remembered it. So she turned it into a story. It was chaos, she told a VP from sales with a bright smile. But you know me, I keep standards. We can't let sloppy people drag the culture down. The VP nodded absently, eyes scanning the room for someone more important. Emily didn't mind. She planted her narrative anyway. Stories had a way of sticking, even when attention didn't. Across the ballroom, Ethan stood near the same column, still holding a glass of water. He hadn't tried to join anyone important. He hadn't even tried to talk to Emily after she snapped at him. He looked like a man who came for a reason that had nothing to do with being seen. It should have made him invisible. Instead, it made him stand out. Because everyone else was performing. Everyone else was reaching. Ethan wasn't. Emily forced herself to stop watching him. She was here for her own future. She'd been told, quietly by someone who heard things, that a new position was being created, senior director over the merged brand and product communications teams, the kind of title that would lock her trajectory in place. She'd spent months working for it. She deserved it, and tonight she intended to make it inevitable. That meant being seen with the right people, saying the right lines at the right volume, and proving over and over that she understood how the world worked.
So when Brett brought up Ethan again, when he made another joke about the old car, Emily saw an opportunity and took it. She raised her glass and said, loud enough for the nearest cluster to hear, "Honestly, I don't even care what someone makes, but when you show up like that, you're inviting people to assume things. That's just reality. Looks can be deceiving, sure, but most people don't bother looking twice." A couple of people laughed. Someone murmured agreement. Emily's eyes flicked toward Ethan. He hadn't moved. He didn't look hurt. That annoyed her more than any comeback would have. She started to walk toward him, not because she needed to, but because she wanted the satisfaction of making him acknowledge her power again. She wanted the audience. She wanted the small thrill of watching him swallow it. And then her phone buzzed. A message from Marissa in HR, short and strange. "Need to talk, ASAP." Emily paused near the corridor leading toward the coat check. The music from the ballroom thinned there, replaced by muffled voices and the quiet rustle of coats being retrieved. Marissa stood by a tall plant, face tight. "What is it?" Emily asked, annoyed. "Now?" Marissa's eyes darted toward the ballroom, then leaned in. "Just be careful tonight," she said. Emily blinked. "Be careful about what?" Marissa's eyes darted toward the ballroom. "About who you say things around." Emily scoffed. "It's a company event. Everyone's saying everything."
Marissa swallowed. "Not everyone. Listen, this is going to sound insane, but there's a situation." Emily's annoyance sharpened into curiosity. "Spit it out." Marissa hesitated. "Someone from the board might be coming." Emily's pulse jumped. "Tonight?" Marissa nodded once. "Not confirmed, but rumors, and if it's true, they're not coming for a speech, they're coming for evaluation." Emily's mind immediately calculated. If board members were coming, this was even better. This was the exact arena she could shine. She pictured herself being the first to greet them, being remembered, being the one who looked like she belonged. "What does that have to do with me?" she asked, already half smiling. Marissa looked pained. "Emily, people have filed complaints about the way you talk to juniors, about incidents." Emily's chest tightened, but she forced a laugh. "Complaints?" she echoed. "From who? People who can't handle a little accountability?" Marissa didn't smile back. "Some of them are serious, and they've been reopened." Emily stared, trying to interpret this. Complaints were normal. People complained when they were weak, and Westbridge didn't reward weakness. She leaned closer, voice cool. "Who reopened them?" Marissa's eyes flicked away. "I can't say." Emily's mind flashed to Ethan, to the way he'd looked past her toward the COO, as if noting something. She felt a small, irritating pinch of uncertainty. Then she crushed it. Ethan was nobody, a single dad in operations, a man who drove an old car, a man who stood quietly in the corner like furniture. Whatever Marissa was hinting at, it couldn't be about him. "Marissa," Emily said, tone sharpening, "you're overreacting. People file complaints all the time. They go nowhere." Marissa's face tightened. This time might not. Emily straightened, regaining her poise. "Thanks for the warning," she said, dismissive. "But trust me, I know how to handle rooms like this." She turned back toward the ballroom, and there, at the entrance, was the shift. It began with sound. Not the loud, tired cough of Ethan's car. Something smoother, heavier, controlled. Heads turned, conversations paused. Even the quartet's violinist glanced toward the lobby as the note vibrated strangely through the glass doors. A black Fortuner rolled under the portico lights outside. Even through the ballroom windows, the vehicle looked expensive in a quiet way. Clean lines, tinted glass, deep black paint reflecting the hotel's gold glow like dark water. It wasn't a flashy sports car. It was the kind of luxury car people chose when they wanted power without attention. A Toyota Fortuner. The kind you saw in executive parking lots and private airports. The kind that said someone had money but didn't need applause. A Fortuner car. Emily's first thought was immediate and selfish, board member. Her second thought followed like an electric jolt. She saw the driver's door open, and Ethan stepped out. For a second, Emily didn't process it because her brain tried to protect her certainty. She blinked hard, as if the glass had distorted the view. But there he was, same calm, same plain suit, same measured movements. He shut the door with the same careful touch. And then he looked up toward the ballroom window, not scanning for approval, not searching for someone to greet him. Just checking, as if he'd been confirming that the room was watching. Emily's throat went dry. Brett, beside her, let out a low whistle. "Okay," he murmured. "That's not his, right?" Emily couldn't answer. Her mind ran in panicked circles. Ethan had arrived in the old car. Everyone saw it. The valet took the keys. It went to the garage. Ethan walked in and stood by the columns. That was real. So what was this? A second car? A friend's car? A rental? Then she saw the detail that made her stomach drop. Ethan didn't hand the keys to the valet. He kept them. The valet stepped back, deferential, as if Ethan didn't need permission. Ethan said something briefly, too far to hear, then walked past the doorman and into the lobby. The doors opened. Cold air spilled in, and the black Fortuner's presence seemed to change the temperature of the room. Conversations faltered. People turned. A few executives broke from their circles, curiosity pulling them like gravity.
Ethan walked in as if he'd never left. Emily stood frozen near the corridor, watching the quiet man in the plain suit become the center of the room without trying. Then a woman Emily recognized, Vanessa Cole, chief executive advisor, a figure people spoke about with lowered voices, appeared behind Ethan, carrying a slim folder. Vanessa didn't look at Emily. She didn't look at Brett. She didn't look at the COO. She walked straight to Ethan and said clearly, in a voice that carried through the hush, "Mr. Bennett, the documents are ready." Mr. Bennett. Emily's heart slammed. Ethan took the folder like he expected it. The room went still, and Emily realized with a sick certainty that she hadn't just misread a coworker. She had misread a rich single dad, a wealthy father, a man with hidden wealth hiding in plain sight, someone with a secret fortune and hidden money behind calm eyes, someone whose financial status had never been the room's business until now. An unexpected reveal was unfolding in real time, and Emily could feel the eyes of the room shifting away from her jokes, away from her confidence, toward him, toward the shocking truth she had just helped expose. Emily had built her career on reading rooms. She could tell when a smile was a negotiation, when a compliment was a test, when silence meant agreement or threat. She could feel power the way some people felt weather, an invisible pressure change before the storm. But she had never felt anything like this. Because the room wasn't just shifting, it was flipping.
Ethan walked past the cocktail tables as if the whispers didn't exist. Vanessa stayed a step behind him, not like security, not like an assistant, like a witness. People parted automatically, instinctively making a path the way crowds do when they sense authority, even if they can't name why. Emily stood near the corridor with Brett and two finance women, frozen in a cluster that suddenly felt cheap. Her mind tried to solve the puzzle fast enough to save her pride. Maybe Ethan had borrowed a Toyota Fortuner for the night. Maybe it belonged to a client. Maybe it was some new company perk for operations. Then she saw the license plate frame as the black Fortuner paused in the valet line outside the window. Subtle, embossed lettering, Bennett Holdings. Her stomach dropped so hard it felt like vertigo. Brett whispered, "Is that him?" Emily's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The question wasn't just about ownership of the Fortuner car. It was about identity, about what kind of man could walk around a company for years as a quiet single dad and still have a vehicle like that waiting outside. Hidden wealth wasn't just money. It was a strategy.
Ethan stopped near the stage where the CEO and COO had been talking with two board advisors. He didn't interrupt. He waited until a natural pause opened, then stepped in smoothly, like someone used to being heard. The CEO's expression changed when he recognized him, not surprising exactly, but the strained politeness of a man realizing he'd been speaking freely around someone he should have been more careful with. Vanessa opened the folder and held it at an angle that kept it private but made the gesture unmistakable, official, important, immediate. Emily watched the CEO glance down at the documents, then back up at Ethan, and in that split second she saw what she'd never seen on his face before: uncertainty. Ethan spoke quietly. No microphone, no announcement, but the room had gone silent enough that people closest could hear, and when they heard, they repeated. A ripple of words moved outward. Signature, restructure, board. Emily's skin went cold. This wasn't a stunt. This wasn't a rumor. This was an unexpected reveal with consequences. The COO said something Emily couldn't catch. Ethan replied with a nod that looked almost courteous, and then he turned, slowly, so his gaze traveled over the ballroom, not hunting for approval, assessing, measuring. His eyes landed on Emily. It wasn't anger. It wasn't a triumph. It was worse. Recognition. Like he had known she would be exactly what she was, and tonight he had simply waited for her to prove it. Emily's breath hitched. She felt the instinct to move toward him, to talk, to laugh it off, to reshape the narrative the way she always did. She wanted to reach him before the story hardened. But her legs didn't move, because the room had started looking at her differently too. People who had laughed at her jokes about the mocked single dad were now suddenly busy checking phones, adjusting jackets, staring at the floor. The same cowardice that had protected her cruelty was now protecting them from association. Emily realized too late that she was standing alone. And then Ethan stepped onto the stage, not with the swagger of a man unveiling his fortune, but with the calm of a man who had already made his decision and didn't need the crowd to agree. Vanessa handed him a microphone. He accepted it without testing it, as if he knew it would work. The room held its breath. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," Ethan said. His voice was even, low, steady. Not the polished stage tone of the CEO, not the hype of an MC,
just the voice of a man stating facts. But I've heard enough. A few people shifted. Someone's glass clinked softly against a plate. Ethan continued, "For months I've been sitting in operations under my own name, in my own building, watching how people treat the ones they believe can't help them."
Emily's heartbeat pounded in her ears. Under his own name, in his own building. His real identity wasn't a rumor. It was sitting right there, spoken aloud like a truth that had always existed. He looked out at the crowd. "Some of you have been kind," he said, quietly, "when it costs you nothing, and when it costs you something." Emily's eyes flashed to Jason, the junior coordinator she'd screamed at. Jason stood near the back, face pale, looking like he wished the floor would open. Ethan's gaze moved again. "And some of you have made cruelty into entertainment." Emily felt every word like a light turning on above her head.
"This isn't about a car," Ethan said, and a murmur traveled through the room because everyone knew what he meant. "It's not about an old car or a luxury car. It's about what people think they're allowed to do when they believe power isn't watching." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to protest. She wanted to say it was just jokes, just culture, just how people talked. But the silence of the room was a verdict. Ethan turned slightly, nodding to Vanessa. Vanessa lifted the folder again, and Ethan said, "This is the restructuring plan. It goes into effect Monday." A wave of tension moved through the room. Restructure meant careers, titles, layoffs, promotions. Ethan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "There's a new leadership standard included," he said. "Results matter. But results do not excuse humiliation. They do not excuse harassment. They do not excuse judging someone by their car, or their clothes, or their salary." Emily's vision blurred at the edges. She felt exposed, like the walls had turned to glass. Then Ethan said the line that made the room react visibly, like a body flinching. "I've listened to complaints that were closed without investigation. I've reviewed exit interviews that all used the same words. I've watched a director embarrass a junior employee over a spilled drink in front of witnesses and call it standards." Emily's lungs seized. He hadn't used her name yet, but everyone knew. Ethan's gaze found her again. "Emily," he said. The sound of her name, spoken from the stage by the man she had mocked, made the room feel unreal. Emily moved without thinking, stepping forward from the corridor into the open, as if walking closer could shrink the distance between humiliation and survival. Her voice came out too fast. "Ethan, please," she began, hands slightly open. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. The jokes, the comments, that's just how we talk. You never said anything. You let it happen, so I assumed—" She stopped, because the sentence had nowhere safe to land. Ethan's expression didn't change. "If I were truly just an employee," he asked, "would you have spoken differently tonight?" Emily's mouth opened. No answer helped her. If she said yes, she admitted she was two-faced, kind only when it benefited her. If she said no, she admitted she was cruel by default. Either way, the room would see the same thing. She was wrong about him, but worse than that, she was wrong about herself. Ethan let the silence hold for a beat, then spoke again. "I didn't come here to humiliate you," he said, and Emily almost believed it until he added, You did that yourself." A few people swallowed hard. Someone near the back exhaled shakily. Ethan continued, "You mocked a mocked single dad because you thought he had no leverage. You saw a poor-looking single dad and assumed failure. You saw an old car and decided it was a resume." Emily flinched. Those were her thoughts, her lines, her laughs. Ethan's voice stayed steady. "Looks can be deceiving," he said, and the words sounded less like comfort and more like indictment. "Not because some people have hidden wealth, not because some people are secret millionaires, but because the character doesn't show up in the title." He gestured lightly with the microphone. "Emily, you were promoted because you delivered results, but you're being removed because you treated people like objects." A shockwave ran through the ballroom. Removed. Not warned, not coached. Removed. Emily's knees softened. Her mind screamed for a negotiation, a loophole, a way to turn this back into a conversation she could win. But Ethan didn't offer one. Vanessa stepped forward and spoke at last, voice crisp. "Effective immediately, Emily will be placed on administrative leave, pending formal review." Emily stared at Ethan, desperate now. "Ethan," she whispered, "you don't understand." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "I understand completely," he said. "I understand the way you looked at me when you thought I couldn't do anything for you." A life-changing revelation pulsed through the room. Not just that Ethan had money, not just that he had influence, but that he had been watching, collecting, measuring the culture like a man inspecting rot behind a wall.
Emily's cheeks burned. Public humiliation, the very tool she had used, was now wrapped around her like a wire. And then, softly, Ethan added, "My financial status was never the point. Your behavior was." He stepped down from the stage, handing the microphone back to Vanessa. The CEO looked stunned, powerless in his own event. The COO avoided Emily's gaze entirely. Emily stood there, suspended in the aftermath, hearing whispers form around her like fog. Secret millionaire, rich man, wealthy businessman, his real identity, his fortune.
They weren't just talking about Ethan. They were rewriting every moment of the last year with new information. Hidden money turned his silence into strategy. Unexpected wealth turned his humility into control. Emily realized the cruelty she'd enjoyed had depended on one assumption, that Ethan was powerless, and that assumption had been wrong. The ballroom didn't know what to do with itself after that. People who had been laughing 10 minutes earlier now looked like they'd been caught in the act of something private. Conversations restarted in fragments, careful and thin. The quartet returned to their instruments, but the music sounded smaller, like it couldn't fill the space the truth had opened. Emily stood near the corridor, as if her body had forgotten how to move. Administrative leave, formal review, removed. She had always imagined public downfall as something that happened to other people, people who didn't manage perception, people who didn't control the story. Not her, never her. And the worst part wasn't that she had lost face. The worst part was that she could feel the room quietly agreeing it was deserved. Jason, the junior coordinator, had shifted closer to a group of other juniors, as if seeking shelter. The finance women who had laughed earlier stared at their hands.
Brett had stopped talking entirely, his mouth slightly open, like a man watching a building collapse and realizing he'd helped pull out the beams. Emily's mind kept reaching for an escape hatch. If she could just explain, if she could just apologize the right way, if she could just make Ethan see she wasn't really that person.
But she was that person. The evidence had been public. And Ethan, calm, unhurried Ethan, had watched it without rushing to stop her, as if he needed the truth to exist clearly before he could act. She saw him now near the lobby doors, speaking quietly with Vanessa. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't gloating. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. Emily's chest tightened with something she didn't want to name. Fear, yes, but also a strange sense of being measured and found wanting. She forced her legs to move. As she crossed the ballroom, heads turned. Not dramatically, no one wanted to be obvious, but she felt the attention like heat on skin. The same attention she'd used to punish Ethan was now stripping her down. Ethan turned slightly as she approached, as if he'd sensed her without looking. Vanessa stepped back, giving them space the way professionals did when something was finished. Emily stopped a few feet away, close enough that he could hear her without her raising her voice, close enough that her pride couldn't pretend she hadn't begged. "Ethan," she said, and her voice sounded unfamiliar, smaller, less polished. "I need to say something." Ethan waited, not cold, not kind, just a presence. Emily swallowed. "I was wrong about you," she said. "I judged you. I made it entertaining, and I'm sorry." Ethan's gaze stayed steady. "You're sorry because you learned something," he said, "or because everyone else learned something." Emily flinched as if he'd slapped her, because the truth was she didn't know. The apology felt real in her chest, but it also felt strategic, because strategy was the only language she had ever trusted. "I didn't know," she whispered again, and she hated herself for how quickly she clung to that defense. "I didn't know your financial status. I didn't know who you were." Ethan's expression softened just slightly, not into forgiveness, but into clarity. "That's the point," he said. "You needed to know." Emily's eyes stung. "But you let me," she started, then stopped, because the accusation sounded terrible the moment she heard it. Ethan nodded once, as if acknowledging what she meant without allowing it. "I did," he said, "because I needed to see what you would do when you believed you were safe." Emily's breath came out shaky. "So what are you?" she asked before she could stop herself. "A secret millionaire? A board member? What is this?" Ethan glanced toward the entrance, toward the valet stand beyond the glass, where his black Fortuner waited like a silent witness. "Labels," he said. "Rich man, wealthy businessman, rich single dad. None of that tells you what you actually did tonight." Emily's throat tightened. "They're saying you have hidden wealth," she murmured, "that you're—" Ethan cut her off gently. "Hidden wealth is not a moral achievement," he said. "It's just money that isn't loud." His words landed in her chest like something heavy and undeniable. She had spent years chasing visibility, believing it was the same thing as value. Tonight she'd learned the difference in front of everyone. Ethan continued, "You saw me as a poor-looking single dad, a humble father who didn't belong here. You decided that judging someone by their car was a shortcut to truth." Emily's cheeks burned again as the phrase echoed in her head, judging someone by their car. She treated it like wisdom, like a social rule she could explain away. Now it sounded as ugly as it was. "I arrived in an old car,"
Ethan said, and his voice carried no shame in it at all. And you used it to write my story. Emily's eyes flicked toward the ballroom, to the people pretending not to watch them. But then the fortuner, she whispered, confused, still trying to assemble the timeline into something she could understand. Ethan's mouth twitched. Not a smile, not quite. "The Toyota Fortuner has been mine for years," he said. "So has the company stock you all talk about like it's someone else's wealth." Emily stared. "Then why the old car?" Ethan looked past her shoulder at the crowd. "Because I wanted to know what the building sounded like when power wasn't performing," he said. "I wanted to know who was kind when it didn't buy them anything." His words made her chest ache because she understood the implication. She hadn't just failed a test, she had revealed a pattern. "And the Fortuner car?" Emily asked, barely audible. Ethan's gaze moved to the glass doors again. "I brought it tonight because I needed to end the experiment," he said. "Because you escalated. Because Jason's face looked the way faces look when someone realizes nobody is going to protect them." Emily swallowed hard. "So you're wealthy?" she said, as if the word itself was dangerous.
Ethan didn't deny it. He said, "I'm a successful single father. And yes, I've had unexpected wealth for a long time. A secret fortune, if you want to call it that. Hidden money in structures and accounts, lawyers and holdings. His fortune, as people will gossip about it tomorrow. But none of that makes me better than anyone else." Emily's voice cracked. "It made you untouchable," she said. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "It made me visible," he corrected, "and that's why you changed." Emily's face crumpled for half a second before she caught it. Because it was true. The moment the room realized Ethan wasn't powerless, her instincts would have flipped. Flattery, alignment, apology. The same reflex she'd mocked in others. She whispered she was wrong about him, and the phrase felt like an understatement so large it bordered on denial. Ethan looked at her, then said, "You were wrong about more than me." Emily frowned, confused through her shame. Ethan said, "You thought the people you hurt didn't matter. You thought your behavior was invisible as long as the results were good. You thought public humiliation was a tool of leadership." He paused, letting the quiet stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "Never judge a book by its cover," he said, and in his mouth it didn't sound like a cliché. It sounded like a warning carved into experience. Emily's eyes lifted to his. "Is that what this is? A lesson?" Ethan shook his head slightly. "It's a consequence," he said. "Lessons are optional. Consequences aren't." Behind them, the ballroom began to thin. People collected coats too early. They wanted to leave before anyone asked them where they stood. No one wanted to be on record laughing at the mocked single dad. Emily realized the room had already moved on without her, the way corporate rooms did when a person's relevance vanished. Vanessa approached quietly, holding a small folder. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "the driver brought the old car around." Emily's head snapped toward the entrance. Through the glass doors she saw it, Ethan's old sedan idling under the portico lights, looking even smaller beside the black Fortuner parked a few feet away. The contrast was brutal and almost theatrical, two versions of a man's life sitting side by side. Emily's voice came out raw. "So that's it," she said. "You have both."
Ethan nodded, as if it were the least interesting fact in the world. "I do," he said, "because people contain contradictions, and because I don't build my identity around what I drive."
He looked at her one last time. "Looks can be deceiving," he repeated softly, "but not in the way you think. The deception isn't the car. It's the story people tell themselves about what a car means." Emily's eyes filled again, and she hated that tears were the only honest thing left in her. Ethan walked toward the doors. Vanessa followed. The crowd parted again without thinking. At the valet stand, Ethan greeted the young attendant by name, thanked him, and took the keys to the old car first. Not the Fortuner, the old car. Emily watched, stunned, as he opened the driver's door and slid into the seat with the same calm he'd carried all night. The engine sputtered, then caught. He backed out slowly, careful, as if nothing about tonight had changed him at all. The black Fortuner remained where it was, gleaming under the lights, proof for anyone who needed proof. But Ethan drove away in the old one. A few minutes later, Emily stood alone near the emptying ballroom and understood the true, shocking truth of the night. The life-changing revelation hadn't been that Ethan was a secret millionaire. It was that he had been the same man before the room knew and after the room knew, and she had not. If she had met Ethan in a hallway on a normal Tuesday, she would have dismissed him. She would have written him off by his shoes, his silence, his old car. She would have treated him as someone who could do nothing for her. And that was exactly what he had wanted to reveal. Not his hidden wealth, but her lack of it. Lack of character, lack of restraint, lack of basic decency. Because the truth about power isn't that it makes you important. The truth is that it exposes what you already are. If you only respect people when they're a wealthy father, you don't respect people. You respect leverage.
If you only speak kindly when you think someone is a rich single dad, you aren't kind, you're strategic. And if you ever find yourself laughing at a poor-looking single dad because you assume his financial status is small, remember Ethan, and remember how quickly the room changed when it learned his real identity. Not because a Toyota Fortuner is magic, not because a black Fortuner makes anyone worthy, but because your character shouldn't need an unexpected reveal to turn on.